Under the 1929 Geneva Convention, medics were protected, unarmed, clearly marked, and shielded by international law. On Iwo Jima, Japanese soldiers turned that protection into a weapon. They learned one English word: corpsman. They screamed it across the black sand to draw Navy medics into the open. The men who heard it knew exactly what it meant. They went anyway, and what followed was never prosecuted as a war crime. On paper, the Geneva Convention of 1929 drew a clear line through the chaos of war. Medics were to be recognized, respected, and protected. They were men whose only weapon was a red cross stitched onto an armband, painted on a helmet, or sewn to a canvas bag. The treaty's language was unambiguous. Medical personnel, so long as they bore no arms and took no part in fighting, were not to be targeted. The emblem, a red cross on white, was their shield. It was meant to be a promise, visible to all, binding even in the worst moments of battle. For the United States, these rules were more than words in a treaty. Navy regulations and Marine Corps field manuals spelled out the obligations in black and white. Corpsmen were forbidden to carry weapons. Their kit, their helmet, even their left forearm bore the red cross, signaling to friend and foe alike that their duty was to heal, not to harm. The Hospital Corpsman Training Manual, issued to every medic, made it plain. The only protection they could rely on was the emblem itself. Orders for the Iwo Jima landing reinforced this point. Every corpsman was to wear the red cross, and none was to bear arms, except a trench knife for emergencies. The United States had ratified the Geneva Convention and built its doctrine around the expectation that the enemy would honor the same standard. Medical annexes in operational orders reminded assault troops that the Red Cross was not just a symbol, it was a legal shield. Hospital ships marked with the emblem were to be spared, aid stations left untouched, medics allowed to move freely among the wounded. The International Committee of the Red Cross, watching from neutral ground, believed the emblem would hold its meaning even in the Pacific. But this expectation rested on a fragile foundation. Japan had not ratified the Geneva Convention of 1929. Its military manuals classified medical units as non-combatants, but did not forbid their use in combat or guarantee their safety. A 1944 directive warned Japanese troops that enemy medics could be treated as combatants if they bore arms. Public statements from Japanese officers dismissed the Red Cross as meaningless in battle. The International Committee of the Red Cross urged Japan to honor customary protections, but the response was silence. In the days before the invasion of Iwo Jima, American corpsmen prepared for their mission with the belief, backed by law, by doctrine, by tradition, that their role would be recognized. They stepped onto the black sand unarmed, marked and visible. They relied on the promise of the Red Cross. They had no way to know how quickly that promise would be broken. The first days on Iwo Jima turned the promise of the Red Cross into a target. Unit diaries from the 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines record the first incident at 0920 hours on February 23rd. A Japanese voice, speaking in rough English, called out a word that sounded like corpsman. Hospital apprentice William J. O'Connor moved from cover, medical kit in hand, and was killed by rifle fire before he reached the wounded. The entry is brief, but the annotation in the casualty log is blunt. "Enemy deception," shouted corpsman. The pattern did not stop. On February 24th, the Yellow Beach Diary notes another call, another medic lost. Deck logs from USS Bunch, anchored offshore, record hearing several Japanese shouting in English the word corpsman repeatedly heard. The logs add a chilling detail. Fire was directed at a Navy corpsman on the forward beach, and only the ship's guns could suppress the enemy position. USS Alt's log for February 28th tells a similar story. Corpsman J. Miller was dragged to cover after Japanese voices lured him out from a bunker, the word corpsman echoing across the sand. Captured Japanese documents recovered from a tunnel on the north slope of Suribachi reveal the intent behind these traps. A field notebook lists English words that the enemy knows. It instructs that corpsman be called when a medic is near, so the enemy will expose himself. Post-war interrogations confirm the practice. Private First Class Hiroshi Takahashi described learning the word from American cries and using it twice to draw medics into kill zones. The toll is not just anecdotal. The Marine Corps' casualty report for Iwo Jima lists 24 corpsmen wounded or killed in the opening week. 9 of those are tagged with a single, stark phrase, enemy vocal lure. The records map these losses across red and yellow beaches, concentrated between February 21st and February 28th, each entry a name and a fate linked directly to the shouted word. They knew what the call meant. They went anyway. Pharmacist's mate, 2nd Class Francis P. Pierce, crawled between blasts on Hill 362, his helmet marked with a red cross, hands stained with blood and sand. The official citation records that on March 15, 1945, Pierce shielded a wounded Marine with his own body, then carried him to safety under direct fire. He was wounded twice, refused evacuation, and returned again and again to the kill zone. The words in his Medal of Honor citation are plain: selfless devotion to his fellow Marines, refused to leave any wounded men behind. Pharmacist's mate, 3rd Class Jack Williams, ran across open sand on March 3, 1945, exposed to rifle and machine gun fire to reach a Marine hit near a crater. Williams was shot 3 times while giving first aid, but kept working until he collapsed. His award, given after his death, speaks of extraordinary heroism and indomitable courage. Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class John Finn set up a triage point after his aid station was destroyed, treating over 200 wounded in the open, shells falling close enough to shake the ground. He stayed at his post for hours, improvising with torn uniforms and morphine syrettes, his hands never leaving the wounded. Finn survived the battle, but 2 of the 4 Navy corpsmen awarded the Medal of Honor did not. Robert L. Parker's last act was dragging a Marine to safety on the first day of the invasion. He was killed before reaching cover, his body found with his medical kit open beside him. The citation notes his determination to save a comrade at the cost of his own safety. In the Veterans History Project, James Cunningham remembered hearing the word corpsman echo from enemy lines and knowing it was a trap. Still, he and others sprinted into the open. The record is filled with names, but each one was a man who answered calls he knew could be fatal. The Navy's highest honor went to those who ran toward the wounded, unarmed, marked, and visible, even when the line between mercy and death had vanished. Imperial Japanese doctrine, shaped by years of brutal conflict and a code that equated mercy with weakness, left little room for the protections imagined by international law. The Imperial Army's field manuals classified medical units as non-combatants, but nowhere did they forbid the targeting of enemy medics. A 1944 directive from Imperial General Headquarters spelled it out. If the enemy medic bore arms, he could be treated as a combatant. In practice, even the unarmed and clearly marked were seen as legitimate targets. Public statements from Japanese officers dismissed the Red Cross as a meaningless symbol, another detail lost in the smoke and noise of battle. Captured Japanese documents from Iwo Jima show a calculated approach to deception. Field notebooks listed English words to use as lures. Interrogation transcripts confirm that the tactic, calling out corpsmen, was taught and used when opportunity allowed. The logic was simple: eliminate the medic, and the enemy's will to fight, already battered by fire and fear, would break a little more. In the culture of no surrender, the act of keeping a wounded enemy alive was itself an affront. The man who ran toward the dying, marked by a red cross, became a priority target. After the guns fell silent, the question of justice remained unanswered. No Japanese officer or enlisted man was ever prosecuted for the systematic targeting of American medics on Iwo Jima. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East focused on atrocities against prisoners and civilians. The Yokohama trials, too, passed over the fate of corpsmen. Legal scholars have scoured the tribunal archives and found no indictments, no verdicts, no mention of the corpsman trap as a war crime. The record is silent, the wound unacknowledged. The promise of protection, written in treaties and worn on the sleeve, ended not with a court's judgment, but with a line in a diary, a name on a casualty list, and the memory of a call answered in the open, with nothing but hope and a red cross for cover. No law could shield a medic marked by a red cross on Iwo Jima. They knew what the call meant. They went anyway. That choice still echoes. It raises hard questions about the price of compassion in war and the silence that follows unpunished crimes. What would you have done?